Who doesn't love nut butter and chocolate together? Hazelnut spread, commonly called Nutella, has become a worldwide sweet sensation, particularly in the last 20 years. It has been around since the 1920s, almost 100 years, thanks to an abundance of hazelnuts in Piedmont, Italy. At that time, people didn't know what to do with them. So Pietro Ferrero created the pastone, a chocolate and hazelnut paste that was a perfect snack to eat with bread. Nowadays, you can find our modern Nutella version in pretty much any country. But what if I told you that you can make your own that is just as satisfying and uses sustainable ingredients? I'm talking no palm oil, no dairy, no soy, and no synthetic vanilla like you find in Nutella. Let's check out my version that has become a household fave. My love of hazelnut spread started when I lived in France during the late 1990s. Of course, that was before it was readily available in the United States. At that time, it became the coveted sweet Americans brought back from Europe in their suitcases. A while back, I discovered a dairy-free hazelnut spread from Italy called Valsoia. I was completely shocked at how good it was. However, it is very expensive. And comparing Valsoia to Nutella, my best description is that Nutella is the fast food version of hazelnut spread, while Valsoia is the sit-down classy restaurant version. No comparisons in my book as to which tastes better. But I don't want to discount Nutella. After all, it is the most popular brand worldwide. Once I realized how good Valsoia was and expensive, I knew I had to figure out how to make a homemade version that was just as good. I won't go into the analysis of my recipe here, but I will tell you that my version has ingredients you likely already have in your pantry, minus the hazelnuts. However, you can use any nut in this recipe and still get a really good tasting chocolate nut spread. Check out my blog link below for the percentage breakdown of ingredients in my homemade version compared to Nutella's ingredient percentage breakdown. You might be surprised. Let's get going. Here are the that's right, only 6 ingredients you'll need for my hazelnut spread recipe. Great Nutella alternative. Hazelnuts, powdered sugar, cocoa powder, a neutral oil like canola. I'm using avocado, but hazelnut would be great. Vanilla and salt, that's it. They are also in order of prominence in my recipe. In fact, hazelnuts are the star in my recipe, unlike sugar and palm oil in the store-bought Nutella. This recipe comes together very quickly. It's a lot like making homemade nut butter. It's all about roasting the nuts, processing them, and adding the ingredients. That's it. Top 20 minutes. I find roasting the nuts really brings out the oils. First, let's roast the hazelnuts. Go ahead and preheat your oven, and in my case, it's my toaster oven to 350 degrees. Then you need a dry pan, and then 170 grams of hazelnuts, which is 1 1/4 cup. Just put them in a single layer on your roasting pan. We're gonna roast them for 6 to 10 minutes. Just check at the 6-minute mark and make sure they're not burning. As soon as they turn brown and smell roasted, they're done. Our nuts are done. You definitely see they're a little toasted, and I can smell them. They smell great, and the oils have been released. And that's pretty much the main reason for toasting them. While they're still warm, place them in your food processor or a blender. And we're gonna blend these until they are smooth and creamy, which means they're gonna go through 4 stages. You'll see them go through crumbly, then powdery, they'll become a thick ball, and then finally smooth. Continue to blend until it's smooth. Don't give up too quickly or you'll have a chunky, which I guess would be okay, hazelnut spread, but we want that smooth peanut butter consistency. Okay, we're at the crumbly stage. They basically just look like little pieces of nuts. Going for powdery. Okay, notice powdery stage. It's definitely finer than the crumbly pieces stage. And this only took about a minute from the last stage to this stage, if less. Now we're sort of at that thick ball stage. And this takes about 5 minutes to go from the powder to where the butter's starting to clump up, but it's not smooth. So when you get to the stage, we're getting very close, but you're not there yet. We've gone through all the stages. Now our mixture is at the peanut butter stage. Look how it just falls off my spoon and oozes down. That's the creamy peanut butter stage. When you get to that point, you are ready for adding the rest of the ingredients. So this took me about 8 to 9 minutes to get to this point. We're gonna add the rest of ingredients in order of percentage. So I've got 112 grams of powdered sugar, which is the same as 1 cup. We have 45 grams of cocoa powder, which is a half cup. We're adding 40 grams, which is 3 tablespoons of oil, 1 teaspoon of vanilla, and 1/4 teaspoon of salt. And we're gonna go back to blending it all up again, and we're gonna go through the same stages. Check that out, it's very crumbly here. You'll notice the mixture will start to ball up. It's starting to separate after it balls up. Just scrape everything down. Make sure everything's getting mixed in. You can flatten that ball out if you want. And then just continue blending. It's starting to become the butter. Notice how thin the mixture is along the edge here, but still crumbly, you can see on the inside. We still got that crumble going on, but it's starting to turn to butter when you look at the edges at the bottom, so just let it run. Okay, take a look at your mixture. Sometimes I only need 3 tablespoons of oil. I think I'm gonna add 1/2 tablespoon more because it's been at that ball stage for a while, and I think it needs just a little bit more oil to smooth it out just a little bit more. So you don't need much, so just be a little bit careful. Add another 1/2 to 1 tablespoon more, and then let it keep going. Notice how smooth it's moving in that machine. It's ready. Take a look. It's nice and smooth. Because the machine is warm and it has warmed the ingredients, this is almost scoopable nut butter here. It'll thicken up as it sits. All that's left now is just to put it in your serving container, wherever you want to store it. Look at that. Notice how beautiful that is. It's dark. It's got that nice chocolate, dark chocolate color. Scott and I are going to taste these and compare them for you, but I want you to look at the textures first and just see what we have here. So this is the homemade version I have in this white container. Okay, notice it's very creamy. Mine's still a little bit warm. Once it cools, it'll harden up just slightly, but still going to be this soft texture. Mine is a little bit darker, and that's because the cocoa that I used was cacao powder, so it's the entire bean, which gives you a lot more health benefits. And I used a lot more cocoa in mine than Nutella does. So in the Nutella ingredients, the order of ingredients are sugar, palm oil, hazelnuts, skim milk, and cocoa. That's what you're looking at in that order. My homemade version is hazelnuts first, then sugar, then cocoa, oil would be after that. And no dairy. Now we have to see what it tastes like. Scott's joining me for a quick taste of our homemade hazelnut spread. Hey, Scott. Okay. I'm glad that you're here to help me take on this taste test challenge. I have a soft spot in my heart for Nutella because of my travels, but I've become somewhat of a little snob after I've tasted some really good Italian hazelnut spread. I try to mimic the really good stuff that's super expensive. So I want to just compare them, flavor, texture, etc., and see what we think about them. So we're going to taste the Nutella first, so go ahead and grab a little bit of that, and then we're just going to talk about the flavors. And people at home, you guys, you eat Nutella a lot, I'm sure, if you're watching this video, so you already know what this tastes like. So this is going to be pretty easy for you to follow along. What are the prominent flavors? What's the mouthfeel?
It's very smooth. The prominent flavors I taste, it's definitely sweet, but you also taste some cocoa, and the hazelnut is kind of mixed in with the cocoa. I don't think either of them stands out.
Okay.
But it's definitely a sweet spread. Like, it's marketed for desserts, so that makes sense.
Right. It's definitely very, very smooth. I love the feel of it because of the smooth texture on my tongue. I agree. I think there's a pretty equal flavoring when it comes to cocoa and hazelnut. All right, let's try the homemade version.
I would say that the smoothness is very similar between the two. Not as sweet. I can taste the hazelnut in your version of it quite a bit more, but you use a different type of chocolate too.
Yes. Okay, let's talk about the hazelnuts. Definitely, I think the homemade version has a stronger hazelnut flavor. The first ingredient in Nutella is sugar, and that is 56% of this jar is sugar. The second ingredient is oil, mainly palm oil. Third ingredient is hazelnuts, which make up 13% of this jar. 13% of hazelnuts in this jar, 46% hazelnut in this homemade version.
Yeah, you can definitely tell that the hazelnuts are much more front and center in that version.
Now, as you referred to cocoa, I used a cacao powder, which is the entire cocoa bean that has been ground down. It provides a lot of antioxidants. It's a much healthier option than cocoa powder, but it is more expensive. You do not have to use cacao powder. Cocoa powder is what you probably want to use anyway, and it's whatever you have at home. Powdered sugar is the sugar that's used in my version. The store-bought, I'm not entirely sure. It just says sugar, so I'm not sure what that means, but I will tell you this. We've had this with cane sugar, and it's not as smooth. If you make homemade version without powdered sugar, it's going to be gritty. So I think powdered sugar actually is a better ingredient when it comes to sweetener. For overall thoughts, do you have a preference?
I do, but it might be different than some people's. My preference is the one that has hazelnut a little bit more front and center. For a lot of people, for humans in general, we've evolved to crave fat as a macronutrient. This has a lot more oil in it, right?
Yes, it does.
But the hazelnuts themselves are also, nuts in general, are also going to be oily. The reason why we've evolved to prefer fat is because we weren't designed to be eating as many meals as we eat. Until the last 150, maybe 200 years, people didn't eat as much as we do. And so we would prefer fat because it's easier for our body to store it, and it's very energy dense, so we can store it a lot easier.
A lot of people prefer processed food over homemade because there's going to be a lot more fat and sugar.
What do you think the shelf life is of your version versus?
It's a lot less. A lot less. So you could store this. I mean, we've actually had this in the refrigerator for a couple of weeks, and it's fine. You don't want to leave it on the counter because it has a lot of hazelnuts in it, and once the oils from the hazelnuts are released, then they start to age and break down very quickly, and and you're going to start getting unwanted things growing in your product here. So it should be refrigerated, but the shelf life, like you said, it doesn't have a soy emulsifier in it. It doesn't have some of those other shelf life stable ingredients that you're going to find in Nutella.
Yeah, so that's one of the reasons why some people might prefer to buy a grocery store version, just because it's going to have a longer shelf life.
That's a good
because
point.
it has a lot of those ingredients, those macronutrients in it that are necessary to increase the shelf life of a product.
Right. For me, I will always have a place in my heart for Nutella, but I will tell you, after having the homemade version, I kind of am moving in that direction because it tastes a little cleaner to me, and it's just not as fatty, and even though I have a sweet tooth, you don't have as much a sweet tooth as I do, so I love everything really, really sweet, which is why my homemade version has a lot of sugar in it, but not as much as even the store-bought version. But I still really like this version, the homemade. It still has a lot of sugar, and it's good enough for me. It's not too sweet for you, is it?
No, I would be curious to see what it would taste like if you made it more like a nut butter without the cacao powder.
Ah, yes.
I don't have any idea what that would taste like, but I wonder what that flavor would be like.
The traditional hazelnut spread was just that, hazelnut without sugar, but with cocoa. So it's just those two ingredients. So no sugar, actually.
The sugar could also be because in the last 60 years, we've been adding a lot of sugar to everything.
Right.
And so the taste buds of people today versus 1960 are probably very different because of the fact that we're used to having sugar in everything.
To each his own for either one of these, but if you really want a more of a wholesome, plant-based, more sustainable, product to serve your kids, you really should try to make your own. Nutella touts as being a great breakfast item. Look at the ingredient list. Keep that in mind. Thanks for your help today.
You're welcome.
And providing your scientific mind in this discussion.
No charge.
I appreciate that. Well, hopefully we've given you some perspective today on homemade versus store-bought hazelnut spread, if you will. Thanks for watching, subscribing, sharing, and supporting my channel. I appreciate you very much. Now, go make a jar of hazelnut spread for you and your kiddos and imagine you're on vacation in Italy. And until next time, go bake the world.